Now I feel like, I'll tell you about this later, a story about this, but I feel like Brian knew many years ago. I'll explain why later. Anyway, so yes, Pat Wright, we're going to talk about speaking community involvement. Another big thing that I'm going to gear this heavily towards the speaker idle stuff. So I'm going to show some slides and stuff that talk about abstracts to present to conferences, all sorts of things, but I'm going to gear it towards speaker idle so that when you watch this recording for anybody that watches it, they can get into the speaker idle as well, and we'll talk all about that. So I think Chad did a good job about me, but it's very important that as I go through my slides, I want you to kind of take a look at my slides as well. This presentation is much about speaking 101 as it is about community. So when you see my slides, these are some things that I'm going to talk about that you should have on the slides. Your about me slide should have a picture. People ask me all the time, why do you need that? The person standing up here. Well, because sometimes we watch this as a recording, and also if somebody watches that recording later on conference, you want to remember that person again and remember the face. It's a bit easier, okay? So pictures are a good idea. Link to the slides are a great idea. Got them up on the slide, share everything else. Again, conferences may have a way to share those slides, but you never know if it works. You don't know what he's doing necessarily. It's a lot better just to have your own place with that. And it helps you in the future as well. I'm not going to talk too much about me because, like I said, we'll kind of get into it here in a second. Now, here's the point of this entire presentation. It's really kind of one slide, and I'm going to show some cool pictures here. But first, I'm going to tell some stories. And that's one of the most important things to do when you're in a presentation is to tell a story. Because 9 times out of 10, you remember a story better than remember the actual facts that you present on the slides. Okay? So my first story is, why do you care about speaking community? Why does it matter to anyone? Chad gives a great reason right now, is that I helped inspire him to start speaking in his career commenced. But let's tell two stories directly on that. So how many people have ever been part of a layoff? Okay, a couple people. Okay, good. So a layoff is a terrible thing. And back in about 2005, I think, I'm trying to remember back to here, I'm getting old. About in 2005, I was with a startup company, and this company was doing great. We had 250 employees, we were making money. Well, we weren't making money, but we were raising money, raising lots of it, and we were doing all these fun and cool things, and it actually worked right down the street from this building, right across the street where the Domo building is now. We were Cento in Equifax. That was the name of the company. I worked there. And Equifax had all these great ideas, all these great things. We were learning SQL Server. We were doing all sorts of cool stuff. We were managing millions and millions of rows of data in call center and doing all of this work. And it's just my favorite thing to do. And then it started to happen. Every once in a while, somebody get a meeting request, and 30 of your friends leave. And they just left. And they were laid off. And then about 3 or 4 months later, another 30 friends left. And so forth and so on. We called it we were walking on roadblocks. You never know when you're going to be beating it right or anything else. It's a terrible feeling. Terrible feeling. If you've never gone through it, I don't really recommend it, but I also suggest plan for it. And how you plan for that is important. Already with community. Coming to user group meetings like this when you're not looking for a job, it's the best way to do that. Because you're already ready to go. If for some reason you get laid off or something happens, you're already ready with your network and everybody else in there. So for me, that layoff happened. I ended up the next day basically working on a car all day. I like to work on old cars, and at the time I had a 76 Maverick. Didn't make a lot of progress on it, but all I did was work on it. I didn't touch any computers. I didn't do anything. I just needed a break to figure out what I was going to do. And then I immediately the next day called up my network and started to make connections and started to find out who's hiring and who's not. And that made all the difference in the world. So the point of the story is that you need to be ready no matter what for all of your different cases of layoffs. Whatever may come, you've got to be ready for it. The best way to be ready for that is users out there. That's what community is really about. Okay. Now we'll talk about the money aspect. The pictures I put up here just because this is my passion projects. This is what I love to do. I'm a photographer and I love to take pictures. Happy to explain these what they are later, but right now we're just talking stories. So the next thing is money, of course. Money makes the world go round, right? I mean, we can't really get away from it. When I was a user group leader, people came to the user group leaders all the time and said, hey, we need somebody to do this. We need this contract. We need something like this. Okay, well, I can do that. And then all of a sudden you're signed up to do these different contracts, helping with money. That was also an experience thing. I tell people all the time in my career, I can say that I've worked in the financial industry, the healthcare industry, the shipping industry, the SaaS industry, a lot of different industries, because at one time I had many different many different contracts, thanks to my work in the users group, thanks to my work in presenting and doing those things. So it makes all the difference in the world if you're out there presenting and you've got those contracts coming in, or the side projects, or your future employment. I tell people all the time, when you sit down right now in this room, and we don't have a lot of diversity in this room because most of you work here at Henry Schein, but the person next to you could be your future employer. That's the whole point. When you go to a user group, when you go to a conference, the person next to you could be your future employer. And you should always keep that in mind. Always talk to the person next to you as well. Okay, one of my last stories, did something pop up?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Both your laptop and mine were both broadcasting at the same time. So
so the muted one.
That's what it said.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't something on my side.
It keeps coming up. You'll probably want to click the don't remind me again.
Don't remind me again. There we go. No worries. Okay, so my final story, because I don't want to bore anybody, but my final story is the 80-20 rule. So as Chad mentioned, I do a lot of organizing of events. Those events stretch outside of the technical world. Right now, I run the vendor hall for Wizarding Days. Hopefully, everyone's heard of Wizarding Days, and if not, I'll tell you about it after. But that stretching out of volunteering in the community has gone a long ways. Last year, I went to this wonderful convention called FearCon. Has anybody heard of FearCon? All about Halloween, horror stuff. It's really cool. It's a lot of fun to go to if you're into the horror genre or anything like that. It's great event. It's coming up in October in Salt Lake City. So I go up to this FearCon, and I've got my two kids with me, and we're ready to get there, and we're ready to buy our tickets and everything, and I see a friend of mine checking people in for tickets. He's one of the organizers of the event. I say, Matthew, how's it going? How you been? We've worked on other conferences together and everything. He's like, great. It's stressful. We're getting through it. We're doing all these things, and I know exactly what he's going through in his head because I've done this so many times organizing events, and he reaches over and he hands me 3 passes. And I said, well, hold on, here's my card. And he's like, no, you don't need that. And he just hands me the passes, and we walk right in. And things like that is what community is about. I'm not saying that every convention you ever go to, you're going to walk in for free. Well, unless it's a Utah Geek Events convention, because we don't charge you. But it's things like that you just get. The 80-20 rule is what they call it, basically. Put out 80% and you'll get 20% back, or whatever that is, to say, let's do this. The point is, the more that you put out in the community, the more it's going to bring back to you, no matter what. Okay, and it really makes a difference when you're presenting. I tell people all the time that if you present, you are seen as the expert standing up here. Right now, you all believe that I'm 100% qualified to speak on Community 101, which, correct, I am, because I've been doing this for a long time. But even if you're brand new at speaking and you're talking about replication or performance tuning or something else, you're still seen as the expert because you're up there speaking and willing to do it. So you will get jobs and positions and things because of that, okay? It also shows a passion and drive that I'll talk about in just a second. All right, so to explain the why, my little slide here, I'm missing one picture. There we go. To explain the why is that I like to spend my time doing photography, and photography is one of my passions. So to do that, to have that extra time, I actually give more time in the community. Because, see, I have to worry about less things. I don't have to worry about finding a job a lot of the time. I don't have to worry about other things because I've put so much other time in the community, I have plenty of time for my extracurricular activities and these things. Now, a lot of people that know me very well know that I've ran 7 users groups this month alone. So they're like, no, you don't have time for that. But that's not true. It's not always like that. That's just me. So, really quickly going around, this is Zions National Park, the subway. Anybody been to the subway? This is a view called the Crack. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. If you ever take the subway hike, be very careful. It's not only dangerous, it's long and it's treacherous and it's very tiring. It's a backwoods hike, so you have to permit for it.
That's what I've always wanted to do. But every time people were going, it was something I couldn't get to.
It's hell. I've done it twice now. It's not easy. Really? Oh yeah, it's not easy. Yeah, I'll tell you all about it. And I may do it in November again. I don't know. Some reason I keep going back. Yeah. The other two are Bell's Canyon. Well, this one's Bell's Canyon. This one is Ferguson Canyon right up here. The interesting thing about this waterfall is that I fell into that waterfall, into that river, lost my glasses, and still made it back down the trail. It was a fun day, that one. Luckily, I don't have that bad of eyesight, so I was able to do it. But yeah, I cut myself up pretty bad. And then this is what Chad and I were just talking about. These are the kelpies. The kelpies are a mystical creature in Scotland that rise up out of the water and have horse heads out of the water, basically. Underneath, they're not. They're not good things. They're told to children as nightmare stories, not good things. But these are giant. This is a park right off the highway. If you drive by, you should be able to see it when you're going through. You should be able to see it. They're about 30 to 35 feet tall, so they're pretty big. Yeah, yeah, they are. It was an amazing sight to see, but it, yeah, pieces of squares of metal, yep.
With holes in between.
Yep. And like I said, the bus rider's like, yeah, these are not really a good thing. They scare children, but we made a big park out of them. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, but okay.
Where children play.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so that's really the why. I'm going to get into the why. I'm going to talk about a little bit more why, but now we're going to go into some of the technical parts of talking about actually getting ready for a presentation, okay? So the number one question I get is I am scared to get up there and present, okay? Chad mentioned it right here at the beginning. He had a fear of presenting, a fear of getting up there. What is my best suggestion for that? I've got two suggestions always. 20 seconds of courage. Does anybody know what the 20 seconds of courage idea comes from? It comes from a movie. No? It's called I Bought a Zoo. It was a bad movie. Nobody liked it. It was with, I thought it was with Brad Pitt, but it's not. It's with the Good Will Hunting guy. I can't remember his name. Brandon. Yeah, Matt Damon. Yeah. And so what the idea behind this is that it took 20 seconds for me to walk across the room, ask my future wife whether or not we could go out to dinner or ask her out on a date. It took 20 seconds of courage to change my life forever. And that's what it really means, is that if you can say submit, if you can push the button to submit in 20 seconds of courage, you can change your life forever. It'll make a big difference if you can present or do anything else. That's what I always think about whenever I'm truly afraid of getting up and presenting in front of people. Like when I did 500 high school kids at a conference. I do a keynote every year for 500 high school kids. I can't tell you how nerve-wracking that is. But it takes 20 seconds of courage for me to get up on stage, and then I'm okay. So past that point. So always think about that. 20 seconds of courage is all it takes. What do you need to actually present? What do you need? You need passion. Whatever you are most passionate about should be the first thing you present about. If that is VB6, present about VB6. I know it's not. But if that is Java, present on Java. Whatever it is, make sure that's the first thing you present about. The first time I presented at a SQL Server user group was 2005. The user group barely existed back then. And I presented on performance stats, bringing them into Excel using a data query, which is old school now, but you could do it back then. And that was what I presented on. And I only presented my first time for about 15 to 20 minutes. And it made all the difference in the world. Once I did that, I got the bug and I kept going from there. So always present on what's your first important. Another great story, Pause the Introvert. This is one of my favorite stories to tell. How many people know Andrea Allred, Royal SQL? Okay, good. So how many people think Royal SQL, who dresses up in princess dresses, is an introvert? She is. No, she is. Trust me. She is 100% an introvert. But she knows the idea of pausing the introvert for when she has to speak, when she has to be up in front of people, or those other things. I'm not saying you should change your introverted nature. You can be introverted. You can come up here and speak and present and then go home and relax and quiet and not have everybody around you or something like that. You just have to pause it for a short amount of time. That's what you have to do. Okay, so you're not telling yourself, I've got to change. I can no longer be an introvert. I have to be an extrovert. No, you just have to pause it for a short time. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? And then the last one is the willpower. How many people love to say, I just need more willpower and I'll get up there and present? Okay, nobody. Good. There's a book out there called Change Anything, and this book was done by the gentleman right here. I can't remember the name of their names are all right here, but they're Aspen Research, I believe. They're in Alpine. Arbinger Research. Yeah, they're in Alpine. Yeah, they're in Alpine, Utah. They created this. They created Influencer. No, not Influencer. the other How to Change book. I can't remember the name of it now. But anyways, the Change Anything book really talks about willpower is not the answer. You have to learn to love what you hate. Find ways to make what you really don't like, tell yourself something in your head, okay, I really need to do this. For me, it's lawn gardening right now. I'm trying to rebuild my yard. I'm trying to put in concrete, do a whole bunch of other things. I really don't like to work on my yard. But I tell myself it's going to improve my house. It's going to help my health better because I'm going to be working out more. So that's how I do it. That's how I get through it. Tell yourself something good about it, and then it'll be easier to do. Okay? So that's really all the passion sides of things, the community sides of things. Now we'll get into technically what you need to do to get ready for a presentation. Is there any questions on the why community or why the passion side of things? Yes.
So willpower is not the answer. Is it passion and pausing the introvert? Are those the answers?
No, the answer, if you don't, willpower is not the answer. If the answer to that is finding a way to say something in a way that's positive, that makes you happy about it. Like I just said for the gardening example, I don't like to garden. If some people would say just have the willpower, get through it, stick it out, you can do it no matter what. No, the answer is find a way to say I really like gardening because it increases my value of my house. It increases my health. It makes me feel better. That's how you should present it.
So is the chain then use,
Yeah.
find a positive,
Yes.
and get your 20 seconds
Of courage.
That 20 seconds of courage commits you,
Mhm.
and now you kind of have to follow through.
Yes.
And then
When you're on stage,
when you're
pause
on
the
stage, just pause
Mhm.
and let it go.
That's a great way to put it. I should flip those all around, shouldn't I? Yeah.
Well, no, because you step back and like, well, I'll take just 20 seconds. I think
Yeah.
it makes sense the way you got it, but I just want to make sure I have.
Yeah, that is in the idea. That's exactly it. 20 seconds to push the button. Willpower is there to get you over the hump of trying to go through that. And I say willpower is not the answer for everything. I mean, again, for me, gardening is what I did for all sorts of things. If you can help focus yourself to say, this is really important to me, even if you hate doing it, then it'll help you out in the future. It's something you need to do. And honestly, if you want to hear really good explanations, go check out the book, Change Anything. It's one of my favorite books. I've read it at least 3 times. It's really one of my favorite ones.
I guess keeping that positive piece in your mind helps you to remember, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Here's the focus. Here's the end result that I need. I can survive this.
Right. When the anxiety sets in.
Eat the green beans because there's chocolate.
Exactly.
Right there.
Yes. It's honestly, this book is the same thing that has helped me go. I do a low carb diet. I've lost 80 pounds in the last 2 years, and it's all a lot related to that. So it's the same thing. How do you not touch the chocolate cake when you want it really bad?
I think that was a bad example.
No, but it's true. It's the same thing. Okay. Any other questions? No. Okay. So here's the communities you can go to start looking into these things, to start helping out. And whenever somebody says to me, I'm not sure what to present on, I've already talked about that. Present on what you're most passionate about. Second, they're like, well, where do I go to present? Trust me, we have over 110 meetups in the Salt Lake City area. I kid you not. Go out to Meetup, search for tech, and you'll find 110 in about a 50-mile radius. So there is never a short supply of places to go present, okay? And nothing else, start here. Start right here at a users group. Start here at the SQL Server users group. You can see we have a small audience. It's a great place to start. The other places to check is if you have a technology focused group, like in Slack, there is a SQL Server users group for Slack. Use that. Talk to people there. Find out where you can present. And then getting further and further, talking into Utah Geek events and the larger conferences. SQL Saturday is coming up. We did just close the call for papers, so hopefully if you wanted to, you got in. But otherwise, that's a great place to get started too. Always start small at your users group first and then go forward from there. And join these communities. Even if you're not attending all of the meetups or anything like that, join them. If they've got a great topic you want to see, attend it. It's very, very important because it makes all the difference in your future career. And I try to tell this, I just got done hiring a junior DBA at my office, and I must have gone through 30 different computer science graduates or just graduates from BYU, U of U, UVU, and all of them are like, yep, I've got a high grade point average, everything else. I'm like, how many meetups have you been to? None, not a one. And I'm like, you should have got a lower grade point average and you should have done more meetups, because I tell people all the time, it's a simple thing. Your professor is not there to hire you. They're there to teach you, and I understand that 100%, but they're not there to hire you. The people that are going to hire you are sitting in this room at a meetup. That's so much more important than finishing all of your school in a 4.0. Yes?
So, I'm kind of curious by a raise of hand, how many people have actually done a presentation at either a meetup or in a classroom setting? You've actually volunteered to present or anything. I mean, I've done it several times.
So the question was, so that we get on the recording, make sure, how many people have actually presented at a meetup or something else? And it looked like almost everybody said yes.
Yeah, I've done it multiple times.
Good. Good. Definitely, you want to do that. You want to keep doing that. So, okay. So now let's talk about actually submitting what you need to do and what you need to do to get into a user group or anything else. Here's what your abstract submission should be. Basically, you're always going to have an abstract and a bio. Bios are really hard to write because, well, we don't like to talk about ourselves, but have a friend do it, you know. Chad gave me a great bio when I came up, and I didn't even ask him to, so I should have him just write it in the future.
I can think of all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Try to keep it somewhat short to the point on the bio. I try not to go too far. I'm a very humble person, and I hate talking about myself, so I keep mine very trim. For the abstract, make sure that you always submit multiple sessions, okay? Even if you only have one intended, you only want to present once, that's fine. You still need to submit multiples because as the organizer, I may have another session with the exact same content and I've got to pick one. And then whoever's got a second, I'm going to take that second and I'm still going to give that person a slot. Okay, it's very important to always submit multiple presentations, not just one. Now, at the user group level, that's not true. At the user group, you just submit one because you're going to get a month or whatever it is. But at a conference, you always submit multiple. Okay, I even submitted multiple to SQL Saturday, and I'm one of the guys picking the SQL Saturday sessions. So it's just habit. You know, spell check it, proofread it, send it to someone else, say, hey, read through this, make sure it's good. You know, it's like anything else. Do you want it to look good, clean and crisp? I like this next point, write for the audience you intend to have. This is one that Brent Ozar has pushed a lot in the past years. If you get a really bad rating, if you give a really great presentation and you get a really bad rating, you present it to the wrong audience. And the only way you can try to deal with that is by trying to write your abstract to say, this is who I really expect to be sitting here. Now, if somebody walks in and they're not that, and they didn't read your abstract, there's nothing you can do. But if they did read your abstract and they said, oh yeah, that's me, you're going to get a better feedback response, okay? So always try to write for who you intend to be in the audience. So, and then short description and clear, I kind of mentioned that already. Any questions on abstract submission, anything we want to add?
That third bullet point is hard.
Yes, it is. And so I have a link here at the end from Brent Ozar that he did some presentations. I mean, he did some blogs on it. He has a great write-up on it. And I'll reread his write-up probably 2 or 3 times a year sometimes when I'm getting ready to make a new abstract to try to get the concepts right. It's very difficult. And you're always going to get a few that they said, well, this wasn't what I intended to see. And that just happens. It happens. Okay? We'll talk about that in a minute. So what do you got to do to prepare for it? To get ready for your presentation, like I said, tell a story. You saw earlier I told 3 stories. I did that to make sure that your mind was in the right place and that you remembered the facts better. There is a wonderful, after that bit.ly link, presentation by, and now I just forgot his name. I keep doing this. I got to write these down. He spoke at a TED Talk. And he gives the same thing, 3 stories inside there. And he literally tells you stories that will rivet you just on the edge of your seat. And then he says, okay, how did I do? And he just stops them in the middle of them. It's terrible. But go watch that TED Talk. It's one of my favorites. It really talks about storytelling and how to use that. And it makes all the difference in your presentations. The more you can tell a story. Now, for Speaker Idol 101, here's where we're talking about this. Speaker Idol 101, Speaker Idol. Why am I calling it 101?
Yeah, that's what I put because it's the beginning.
Oh, okay. Speaker Idol. Speaker Idol is only a 15-minute presentation, and the reason for that is that we want everybody to start off with something easy. We want it to be just one demo, kind of a few minutes of talking sort of thing, and that's really all it is. It's a quick thing for someone to get over their fear of standing up here and having to do too much prep time to get everything ready. So that's why we do it so short. You can't easily tell a story in there, and if it's your first presentation, don't try to tell a story unless you've really, really practiced. because it takes some time to really get the storytelling correct. I've actually only been doing it for about 1.5 years in my presentations, and I'm still trying to get better at it. So I would suggest telling a story as you go through if you can get better and better at it. Okay, gather your data facts, make sure you know what you're going to do. I will tell you right now, if it's your first presentation or one of your presentations, you're going to over-prepare. In the beginning, you always over-prepare. And that's not a bad thing. It's just, we'll talk about timing in a minute. That's where it's very important, okay? So study and prepare your slides, present to an empty room. This one is critical, 100% critical. Always try to do your presentation 3 times before you get up here and actually do your presentation. Okay, it's very, very important that you speak and speak. Don't just click your slides and say, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say this. Speak 3 times, at least your presentation before you get up. It'll make all the difference in the world because you'll be ready for that presentation. You'll know what to say. You know that I'm not checking my notes too much or anything because I've done this presentation 3 or 4 times this year already. So I know a lot of the things I already want to say. It makes all the difference if you present it beforehand. First to an empty room, you know, just whatever, go to a conference room. I go to a conference room, I sit down, I put it up on the projector, and I start talking about my slides. People have literally walked in on me on an empty conference room talking to myself. It's quite hilarious. Yeah. Then present to whoever else you can get, your family, friends, whatever, you know, whatever that is, or directly to a group like this, and then get better and better at it. The more times you do it, the better off you are. Okay, questions on prep. Anything else you want to know about prep? Okay. All right. If you have a demonstration, I cannot stress this enough. I will tell one of my favorite stories of this. It was a SQL Saturday here in Utah. The gentleman's name was Randy Knight. How many people know Randy? I love Randy. Randy was an excellent presenter, and he had presented somewhere to the tune of like 25 SQL Saturdays across the country. This was like number 26. And he comes in, and he's ready, and he's actually testing his demo beforehand. He's actually testing it there in the room. And I'm like, Randy, you've done this a few times. You're okay? He's like, no, I'll test. Kid you not, 30 minutes later, he gets into a session, his demo crashes. Just goes wrong. I don't know if he lost the drive or what it was, and it just crashes. And he's like, darn it. And that was when he tested just right before, and it still crashed. So I cannot stress this enough. Within any demonstration you have, test it often, practice, and then test it again right before you go on stage. Right before you go up, try to test any demos you have. Make sure you have a backup. What do I mean by a backup? If it's on a USB stick, great. It's on a USB stick and you can keep it off your laptop or something like that. If your demo goes bad, the rules are, or my rules are, apologize once and then move on. If you keep saying over and over again, I'm sorry my demo went bad, I'm sorry this, you know, I wish I could show you this, but I really couldn't, all people are going to remember is that your demo went bad. That's it. Apologize once and keep moving on. If you can snapshot, screen share, take video or anything like that, have that as a backup. Say, okay, this didn't work, but here's the screenshots of what it would look like. That's the best thing you can do. Because then you can still show what you were going to do. It's just not live demo. Okay? So anytime you can have a backup of screenshots or anything, do that. Don't ever, ever, ever depend on office Wi-Fi or conference Wi-Fi or anything like that. I know we have a lot of cloud presentations now, Azure, AWS, whatever it is. I actually did my last demo using AWS actually too, and I shouldn't have. I was using a MySQL server on AWS. But always try to avoid having that network connectivity if you can. If you can use Docker, Vagrant, something else local, do it local because you've got much better chance of everything working properly. Okay? And again, I know sometimes we have to show Azure, things like that. It comes up, then use that. But otherwise, don't. Don't use live data either. If you're just going to demo from your company and say, oh yeah, look at this cool thing I created, create your own standalone thing in the system. Because we had one person actually come to a users group, they VPN'd to a customer and started showing the customer's data, and we were recording it. And I'm like, no, we can't do this. This can't happen. So we had to kill that recording and everything. But yeah, don't do things like that. Try to keep it all in your sample things. Questions on demonstrations? Yes.
So one of the things that I've experienced is that you'll test something and then you'll forget to reset. And so then when you go to, you're a little nervous and everything,
yeah.
and then you go to create the table and it's like, table already exists. And then you go to populate the record and the record key already exists.
Yeah.
Or I mean, that's a SQL example, but it's true with
Yeah.
almost everything. It's like, oh, I forgot I have to undo somehow.
Yeah,
It's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. When I do a SQL demo, my typical SQL demos, I try to put them numbered, and then I open those files, and I have all those files up, and I'll have a reset file right off to the side that resets the database. And a lot of the times, if I'm doing a small demo or something, I'll just restore the backup back to a certain point, and then I'll run setup if it can be done that way. That way, it's almost always a clean copy whenever I'm doing it. Like if I'm using AdventureWorks or something, I'll have it locally on my box and I'll just restore it and then I'll run my scripts through. But you also see another common thing is in data and management studios just have a big long list and certain sections commented out or certain sections to run. That's a great way to do it too. Whatever you want to do, but yes, absolutely a reset script is very important.
I've seen people start to use playbooks as well because you get the query and the results
In Management Studio?
commentary
Yeah.
all in one file.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah. Yeah, anything you can do to organize it, but take your time to organize it. Practice, take your time to organize it. Make sure you've got that ready. And absolutely have a good reset script. Keep the reset script so that basically when I tested, I would reset every time just to test it to make sure my reset script worked. It's just like a backup. If you haven't restored it, you haven't really backed up. So, okay. All right, day of prep. What do you do when it's time to do it? First of all, you relax. No, you do not drink all the alcohol in this picture. Everybody loves this picture because this is not what I'm suggesting. I'm not suggesting you drink a lot of alcohol before your meeting. I'm suggesting that you prep. I put on large parties where I tend to bartend during those parties. That was my preparation for that. I had to get prepared for it, so that was my preparation. I know, probably the wrong idea, but I like it. So confirm with organizers. It does my heart well when a speaker comes up to registration and says, I'm here to speak. Thank you. I love that. If you just show up at your room, we all have heart attacks in the back room. all the organizers are like, oh no, he hasn't showed up. They haven't showed up. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? So please, please check in with your organizers no matter what. Make sure you know where you are. Make sure you know where you need to go. Make sure where you need to be. If you can go to the session beforehand and watch the other presenter and see what the podium layout is and how the screen looks and everything, do that. Maybe there's some problems with the projector that you're going to run into. You'll need to know about that if you can watch the session beforehand. So it's always good to validate your room. If you can't validate your room, a lot of organizers will have green rooms to test on. So you'll have another room where the speakers are, and you can plug in there and test your presentation and so far. And make sure you test your presentation because every time you plug this little video cable in, every one of those projectors gives you something different. They don't all just magically give you the right size. We had one of the craziest stories ever was we had one that for some reason wouldn't show red. Showed every other color but red. Something went wrong with its spectrum or something else. And our keynote speaker had put red words all over in the slides. And there was just blank spaces everywhere. And it was the craziest thing. It's like, how did we get one projector that doesn't show red? And I think the cable was loose or something. But yeah, it was weird. So drink lots of water. I have mine right here. So I say drink lots of water. Now, if you're a coffee person, caffeine person, that's fine. A little bit before to get you up and ready to go because you should be very active the day of prep. In other words, when you're up there, you need to be excited about being up there. You need to be passionate. Don't be back here behind your keyboards quiet or anything. That won't work. So drink lots of water. Another thing that someone has suggested to me, I was at another conference and they suggested a hot tea or just a hot water. It actually expands your throat a little bit and helps you to talk a little bit more. I haven't tried this yet because I'm not really a hot tea or hot water person, but maybe in the future. The other reason, avoid any sugary substance. Don't drink a soda. Don't drink, like I said, energy drinks, maybe, just depends on how sugary they are. You gum up if you drink sugary things before a presentation. And then, of course, test our demos. Any other questions for the day of prep?
So one thing I've noticed is whenever I've tried to present, I'm always really nervous if it's a new environment because it's like, well, do they have HDMI? Do they have VGA? Do they have sound? Do they have DVI? What plug do I need? Do I have all the plugs ready? That does the and it's if you haven't done it before, be sure and verify that you have the right plug.
Right. And do not assume that everybody has HDMI. I've put on 2 conferences in the last year that still have VGA for many of their things. So, I mean, we're moving as quickly as I can, but you get to an older building or something, and HDMI is not the thing. You still have VGA. So I carry, the good news is that I typically carry 3 or 4 adapters in my bag no matter what for both Macs, Windows, and all sorts of things. So I usually just have that covered. And if you want to do anything else, you can buy an adapter that will have all of them and take that too as well. I know Ben has one of those. He likes his. So, all right, presentation time. Do not be afraid to say, I don't know. As long as you followed up with the statement, let me look into that for you. Okay? Don't ever leave it as just, I don't know, I have no idea. Always say, but hey, I can research that for you. Why don't you come up afterwards and I'll help you out and we'll see if we can find the answer to this. Always give a follow-up. I don't know is not a bad thing. Again, you're seen as the expert, but that doesn't mean you're the smartest person in the room or have every answer. It's always a good idea to say, I don't know, and then say, how can I follow up on this? Sometimes, if you have certain people in the audience, you can say, hey, do you know the answer to that? I mean, I've seen it past presentations when they've asked Paul Randall, do you know the answer to that? He's sitting there. He wrote half the code for it. So, I mean, it's obvious. Why don't we ask him instead of saying, I don't know? So things like that, don't be afraid to say it. Repeat the question. This is not only so that you know the person, whatever they asked, you know what question they asked, but it's also, in this case, if you're ever online recording, they need to hear the question on there. Whenever you record and broadcast, you will not hear a question from back in the back room, from the speakers. So you got to repeat that question so you always know what comes up, okay? Always repeat the question whenever it comes up. Comfort. I am in t-shirt and pants. That's usually what I wear. A lot of people will be like, well, you need to be in a suit or something else. Unless you're doing an academic conference, suits are not needed. If you're in a technical conference, wear the speaker shirt or wear pants, something like that. That's about all you need. Be comfortable. If you like to wear 3-piece suits and that's what you're comfortable in, then great. Do it in that. There's no problem. But whatever it is, make sure you're comfortable. Don't wear something that's tight-fitting or something like that. That's going to make you even more anxious about the presentation. Be ready to go. Plug in. I didn't do that this time, but plug-in serves 2 purposes. One, if you get off a flight or something, you run to your conference and you're like, okay, I got to get in, and then you've got 2% battery, well, you're going to die. The other reason you plug in is that when you plug in, your laptop magically shuts off all the other stuff. Like it turns off the screensaver a lot of the times, or it'll turn off other things, or it'll make them go longer. So you don't run into those things. So it's good to be on power because that's what your standard is when you're normally running. So be on power if you get a chance. I know mine's okay, and I took care of it. Make sure you shut down all of your notifications. That means exiting Slack, exiting Gmail if you can, or Hangouts has a sleep mode, exiting team chats, anything like that. Make sure you shut off those notifications. The last thing you want is a bubble popping up while you're doing a presentation or something. Turn all of that off. For my Mac, it has a little sleep mode. Anytime my mirror goes into sleep mode, and it shuts off a lot of those things for me. So, but I still, right before you guys came, we were talking about, Chad and I were talking about, I was closing everything down to make sure that it doesn't pop up. Especially if you're recording like this, because then it's permanently on there, whatever was said. So just turn off all those notifications. Eyes up on your audience. Like I said, do not stand back here and hide behind your keyboard. If you have to do a demo where you have to sit and type, that's fine. That's fine. Sit down, but then stand back up when it's time to talk again and keep that moving. Always keep somewhat moving on a presentation. Don't ever just stay here one spot, and do nothing. What I like to do is a technique called blocking that theaters companies have been doing for years. They pick 2 spots on the ground, basically, right here and say right here. And I look at these way before. Like if I'm on a stage, a raised stage, this is where it's really concerning because you don't want to fall off. But I know that I can walk from here to here and I'll have no problem. And I can look at somebody, I can talk to the audience. I'll have no issues whatsoever because I know I can move between these 2 spots and it's not a problem. It's not too much. I'm not running across the room or anything. And I'm not doing anything huge with like covering up the screen. It's just enough to keep moving. And that's the best way to do it. Okay? Any other questions during presentation time? Yes, sir.
So I know one person told me that they like to do their presentations from a virtual machine, partly because you don't get the notifications. You also, I've seen it many times where the size like the projector over shoots, and if you're near the edge, if you're on a VM, you just shrink it down to fit on the screen. And so doing the presentation from a virtual machine can sometimes benefit in several different ways.
Yeah, so the point was you doing a virtual presentation, doing a presentation for a virtual machine is a great idea. Most presenters will use some sort of Docker virtual machine or something to run their systems underneath there and connect to that. That also takes you away from the web usually. In other words, if you need a database, you're running your virtual machine, you don't have to connect to anything else out there. So it's always a great idea to try to do that. It just depends on your presentation style. The other thing that I like about virtual machines is you can put them on USBs pretty easily. If you get a small one, if you can make a relatively small image, then you can just, okay, that one broke. I can borrow Chad's computer for the next presentation, possibly pop it in, and usually I can get it running in case my laptop completely dies. Very few people walk around with backup laptops. Two of them are Paul and Kimberly. So they're one of the few that I know. They actually had 3 at one time, I think. Okay. Feedback follow-up. All right, so this is one of the hardest things that I tell every one of my presenters. I say, when you hit that magic submit button, you have to assume one thing. You have to be ready to put your armor on. As soon as you hit that magic submit button, you're about to get, feedback from people. Whether that's a lot, whether it's not, you're going to get some sort of feedback, and sooner or later, you're going to get bad feedback. It's that simple. It's going to happen. So you have to be ready for it. You have to be ready to say, okay, I understand. This is something I need to improve on, and this is how I get better about it. But you have to be ready for it. The hardest part of my organizing life, whenever I organize an event, the hardest day for me is Sunday afternoon. You know what I do on Sunday afternoon? I read the feedback from my conference from Friday and Saturday. So I'll go in there and I'll start reading all the different feedback. That's my hardest day because it pulls out everything that I did wrong at that conference. Whatever it may have been, it finds every one of them. So you have to be ready for that. So the good news is one, telling your people that you want feedback. Please give me feedback. I would love to have feedback. That's helpful. Number 2, always give constructive feedback, okay? You'll know this now. Once you present or something, you're like, I'm going to tell the speaker a lot better than he sucks or she sucks or your presentation sucked. That doesn't help anybody. It doesn't teach them anything. They don't get any better. But if you said, hey, I really didn't like you moving around so much, or you really should have practiced your demo more because it didn't seem to work, and you kept mentioning over and over again how it didn't work. Let's just apologize once and keep moving forward, that sort of thing. That's constructive feedback. That's feedback you can give to somebody, and that'll help. Okay? So follow up with any of the attendees. If you said, I don't know, and you wanted to follow up, either write a blog post, post something on LinkedIn. If they gave you their email address, be a good person and follow up. If you can do that, great. Then that will help out, and you will make a connection from that too. That person will then be like, oh, look, he followed up with me, and I got that information. That's perfect. So, all right, any questions on feedback follow-up? Also, don't be afraid that you're not going to get too much feedback at first. Now, the nice thing about Speaker Idol, the way we've designed Speaker Idol, is that one of the things that we did before every Speaker Idol is we teach everybody how to give constructive feedback. We try to say this. We say, tell people what they did wrong, how they did it. Don't be, mean about it, but also be truthful about it. I really did not like that you said my demo died 15 times. That's a good constructive feedback. But try to do that when we do Speaker Idol, because then that helps those people get really started. That good constructive feedback made all the difference in our first Speaker Idol. And when you go to a large event or a users group, don't expect a lot of feedback. Unfortunately, people don't leave feedback. It's just not. I've worked for 3 different feedback companies, and I'm telling you right now, the industry average is less than 2% of all surveys are ever answered in just about every industry. Some even less. Conferences even less.
Unless you get free stuff.
Even if you get free stuff. I've given away $150 worth of gift cards at every one of my geek events. To 1,200 people, I will get less than 200 responses. So that's a good secret, actually, too. If you ever really want to get a gift card, your chances are excellent whenever you answer my feedback surveys because the pool is actually very small. Like I said, you could give away $1 million, and I guarantee you, you'll get less than 2%. Because people do not want to leave feedback. They don't want to take the time.
Well, one of the things about feedback is the fact that now you know my email, and I don't want to be spam.
So most feedback at conferences is pretty much anonymous. Sometimes, it depends. If it says it's anonymous, it is. If not, then it's not. So like Utah Geek Events, our feedback system, we use a website for each session. It does record what user was doing that, so it knows which one was there. It records it by an ID. So we do have the ID of the person that sent it in, but that's it. So we don't really have their email. The speakers never see the emails that it comes back from it. The speakers just get the feedback. We could track it back, but they cannot. So, and keep that in mind, usually at an event, your speaker won't necessarily get the email feedback or anything like that. They'll just get feedback of what it was. They won't get the actual person that did it. So as far as the spamming, again, most conferences shouldn't do that, but I can't speak to any conference but my own. We don't ever give out sponsors like that or sell our information. So that's been one of the bedrock principles of Geek Events since the beginning, because I have been to several conferences where I went there and then I got like 30 emails and I'm like, I didn't even see this many booths. And yeah, I can't stand that. It drives me nuts. Okay, so here's some of the good resources out there to look for. And again, this is on the recording now and my slides are up on the slide share. We can link it back off into the meetup group so you don't have to write these down or anything. But these are a lot of the good ones. Death by PowerPoint is always a funny presentation. If you have not watched that, it's hilarious. Don't do it. Basically, just don't do it. But it's hilarious. They talk about what not to do. Okay.
That was slide design kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, slide design, yeah. So, and then the last point I'm going to make, and I think I did it, yep. So, a lot of people ask, do we need a Q&A slide? Okay, Q&A is one option. What I like to do personally for my Q&A slide is I don't include it. I did it on this session because I'm going to talk about it. Normally I don't include it and I just end on my About Me slide. The reason I do this is because one, it allows people to go to wherever my slide share is to talk about it there. Two, I usually have my own QR code feedback link up here too as well. There's a feedback site out there that you can just put a QR code and you can scan it and then you can give you feedback about the session. So that's why I do this on my About Me. So now if I ask questions and answers or anything, they can all look at that while I'm talking so that that stays up there. I don't really like using the whole Q&A slide. It doesn't work for me. I prefer to do this. The other important thing, so I'll say this and then we can talk Q&A anyways because we have a little more time, but the other important thing is make sure you end, okay? You can say, okay, do we have any questions? But what you might want to say is, okay, I'm going to stay back. I mean, we've still got about 10 minutes left in the session. If anybody's got questions, please stay. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed my presentation today. I hope you all enjoyed it as well. Thank you. And then everybody would clap and so forth and so on. Always end your session. If you say, okay, what questions do you have? People are just going to keep hanging around for 25, 30 minutes, and maybe the next person needs to get in, the next presenter and everything. You got to end your session, okay? So I always end it. I say, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciated it. If you want to ask me Q&A, I'm here, but otherwise, everybody else can leave. And that lets everybody go. And it makes it a lot easier, okay? So, what am I doing on 10 minutes? Oh, good.
What did you a chance to give some feedback?
Yes.
I've been a great presentation, and I was all ready to applaud because it was awesome.
Right, and then they drag on.
We never got to the end.
Yeah. Yeah, you, again, a nice, clear ending. There's nothing wrong with a nice, clear ending. And there's tons of people that want to leave and just go on and do that. So, and now that I saw the time, it reminded me of this too. So let's go back to day of. There's a few things I forgot on here. One, if you've got presenter mice or anything like this, use these. I do love them. Mine also has a timer on it, so it vibrates after a certain amount of time. That's a great way to keep track of the time. I don't really need it for this presentation, but typically I will set this to about 35, 40 minutes so I know when I'm getting closer to the end and whether I need to speed up or slow down. That works for me. That's what I do. I know people have done different things. The second thing on the day of, on the presentation time is make sure you get out of the podium after you're done, okay? Be nice to the next speaker coming in because you're going to get a flood of people up to your podium to say, hey, I got this question, I got this question. Grab your stuff, say, let's continue this discussion in the hall, and then that next person can get set up. You can do no greater thing for a speaker than getting off the podium so they can get set up and get ready, especially if you went over time. If you went over time, you really got to do this. And many organizers now are like, if you go over time, we're going to kick you off the stage, basically, because it's a bad thing. You don't want to go over time. So always make a chance that you can get your stuff and go. Most sessions are all standard 60 minutes, but 45 minutes is usually what we say for presentation time, and about 15 minutes Q&A. That doesn't mean you should Q&A at the end of the session. I always like to Q&A in the middle of the session. Personally, I do not want anybody to hold a question till the end. It doesn't work. It takes way too long. They can't remember what you were talking about. You're flipping back 50 slides. Just ask the question right then. And tell them that. I would love to have this as a discussion. Please feel free to interrupt me and ask me a question at any time. Okay? All right. What other questions do we have?
So I appreciated the fact that pretty much when you're ready to go on, you would ask on every slide, is there any questions?
Mm-hmm.
Because I started to realize that's what you were doing,
Mm-hmm.
so I could hold my question until you were done, and
Right.
then I could make a comment or a question. That was really nice.
Yeah, I do like to ask on each slide, but I don't mind, for me personally, I don't mind if people interrupt while I'm doing it. But it's a great way to say, I'm going on to the next section, understand that I'm about to leave this and I don't expect questions back on this. It's a good way to transition through each one of those, yes, absolutely. That is definitely my style. I usually will say, this is a discussion, please feel free to ask me questions while we go through. I forgot to do that when we started. So, yes?
Do you have any recommendations for how to prepare for a room of unknown size, as far as you make it big, you make it small, and switching between slides and management studio and inside of VM and outside of VM where things are different sizes and some of it can be seen, some of it can't. What is a good way to solve those kind of issues?
So the question was, what's the best way to handle really management of lots of windows, lots of things moving and shuffling about, and possibly different sizes, resizing them and so forth and so on.
And the size of the room, too. This is a small room, so
Right.
we were all kind of close to the screen.
And size of room.
We're a long ways away.
Right. So let's talk first. So size of room, to me, the only difference with a big room versus a small room is repeating the question and microphone. If you get to a bigger room, please ask for a microphone, especially if you're a quiet person. Or if they have one on the podium, use it. Okay? It's that simple. If everyone is straining to hear you in the back, they will not pay attention to what you're saying because it's too hard. They have to be focused, and so they have to do it. And no one will sit in the front row, this being exclusions. But usually no one sits in the front row. So larger rooms, microphone, and repeat the question. Because again, in that room, people won't hear what the other person said. Okay, a perfect example is the SQL Server Users Group in Salt Lake City. When we get into the East room in IHC, it's really hard to hear, and it's a big room. Okay, that's the only thing I would do different for size of rooms. Personally, if you get really scared that there's 100 people out there, then that's anxiety. That's, figuring out a way to make yourself feel good about it. But otherwise, it's the same thing. When I stand on stage to 500 high school kids, I feel like I'm presenting to 20 of them, the same thing. Okay. The other parts, switching around and resizing windows based on size. The only suggestion I have there really is a practice sort of thing. You can't predict, again, you cannot predict these projectors. If you can go to the place first and do the presentation, then great, then you can figure that out. Like if it's in your own conference room and you can practice on that conference room, you're good to go. But if you're going to go to, like for us at Big Mountain Data later this year, we'll be at Goldman Sachs, and they have 2 giant TVs on both sides. And they tend to operate a little differently than projectors. There's not going to be a lot you can do to practice for that, besides trying to find a TV and play around with it as well. I don't have any magical thing that resizes and everything and puts it there. If you can do a VM, like was suggested earlier, and you can leave them all up there and maybe suspend the VM, then you might have an easier time doing it. But the best thing I can suggest is practice. Try to flip back and forth, try to walk through it, and then you'll get better and better at it. We didn't really talk about live coding demos either. If you're actually typing in a demo, which again, I always suggest not to do, have your scripts ready to go. But if you find yourself doing it, just practice is the only thing you can do. I've met a few people that are wonderful live coding demoers that can stand at the podium and code at the same time, and it's amazing to watch. And I've seen way too many that are not, that are just Terrible. We had one session at Open West that I was like, all he did was try to present, what he does on his day-to-day basis, and all he was doing was making all the mistakes that he did every day and everything, and none of his things were scripted, and it was painful because he was like Google searching this command or that command. Like, this isn't a presentation. We're just watching you work. This doesn't work. So practice is the best thing I can suggest on resizing or any of those things. If you can put it on TV and then walk through it, you'll have a much better chance. Okay, other questions? Yes.
So have you, two parts to it, I guess. Have you done remote presentations, and if so, what are the rules and how does it work with, you're the remote person presenting to a room, and you're not even in the room with them. How does that different?
I have done remote presentations, so the goods and bads of remote presentations. The goods, obviously more people can see it. The bads, as a presenter, you get no feedback whatsoever. None. You're looking at a screen. It stinks. It's that simple. It stinks. If you have not presented, I would say, 10 times, if you're not comfortable doing a users group of 30 or 35 people, don't do a remote presentation because it'll be a lot harder for you to do it. A lot of people say, well, you don't see anybody. You don't see their, falling asleep or anything like that. You don't see any of those problems, but that's the problem. You don't see any of that, so you get no feedback. You can't slow down. You can't speed up. You can't read people's faces. It's a much harder playing field to do a remote presentation. So my suggestion, the goods are lots of people get to see it. You can publish those things online. It's very helpful. The bads, again, practice, and just try to work on your timing as much as possible. With a remote presentation, you've got to find a way to either speed up or slow down or hit your time perfectly because you're basically usually time boxed in that thing. And if somebody's falling behind, you have no way to predict that they're falling behind. You have no questions you can ask necessarily to get that. Some of the remote apps can allow you to ask questions in between. Like I've had sessions where it was, in the middle of it, okay, are we doing good, or is this information important to you, and you could adjust, but a lot of that's not real time. So it just depends. Yeah, I would stay away from remote presentations unless you've done it a few times before.
Sometimes it's cost prohibiting, though. If you want a speaker and you can't afford for the 6 of us to fly somebody from New York to come present to us.
Well, but if it's internal for a company or something, that's a different story because you've got that feedback. They're probably both in a conference room, and it's more of a live meeting sort of thing where you're both talking and chatting back and forth. That works. What I'm talking about is, again, you go to a Brent Ozar remote session or something that he's recorded and he's doing live. That's a different thing. You have a couple hundred people in the audience, but he's just presenting away, and he doesn't know any of that feedback part of things. If it's somebody coming out to present or to keep them from flying out, you can do that via live meeting, and then you have interaction. As long as they can see the rest of the audience, you have interaction. You're good.
You could do that with a presenter where you have a camera, and I think we've done that here, where you have a camera in the audience. And so when somebody's falling asleep, they can say, "Hey, I see the person in the second row is not."
Yeah, it's still a little harder though, because again, if I'm at home or something doing this presentation and I'm looking at my computer, I'm going to be sharing this. I got to have at least another screen to see the other monitor and stuff. So it may just depend. I mean, if you had me do it right now, there's no way I could see another group of people because I have barely even looked at my laptop this whole time. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges to it. Like I said, I would stay out of it as long as you can.
We should probably at some point talk a little bit about next month.
Yeah. So Speaker Idol.
I would love to have you do it.
Okay.
Since you're more experienced, if you're
Okay.
together,
Absolutely. No, Speaker Idol. So what Speaker Idol is, what it was designed for was to get people involved in speaking. We did it the first time back in the SQL Server User Group many years ago. And the idea is that we want you to do a 15-minute presentation, and we would have several of these 15-minute presentations in one session. So in July, the hope is that you get 2 or 3 people, and they all do 15-minute presentations up here. Those 15-minute presentations should be a quick idea. We had one person teach us in PowerShell how to do a backup, something like that, or teach us in quick performance tuning for how to query performance tune a certain query, something like that. Whatever you're most passionate about, whatever you can get in about one demo and one amount of time. The reason we chose 15 minutes is, one, if it's your first time, you're going to over-prepare. You're going to do about 30 minutes. And that's why we want you to learn to cut it down into a 15-minute presentation. It's actually harder to do a 5-minute presentation than a 60-minute presentation. I kid you not, it's really hard. But a 15-minute is a nice, good number that you can work with, and it's not so scary. And then we also say it's also for the group here, where it's a smaller group. And you'll get good feedback. You'll get good constructive feedback, because we'll tell everybody, give good constructive feedback, and everybody does that. So you've got all of those things to get you started, and then the goal is you take the 3 or 4 top people and you schedule them later in the year for the full 60-minute presentation. So you take your presentation that was only 15 minutes and then you expand it to something bigger for later in the year. This gave us not only new speakers, but it gave us sessions throughout the year. So that's the goal, is that you do it maybe July, August, however many people sign up, July, August, and then those months after that.
They signed up.
Okay, good. That's the other thing too, Chad should always know. You never ask someone to present. You tell them, when are you going to present? And you say, okay, you've got May. Done. That's probably how I got most of my first presenters started. Now, it's not for nothing. Utah Geek Events is going to sponsor speakers for this. We're actually going to give you speakers for speaking. It's a nice little Bluetooth Anker speaker. It's one of my favorites. I have 3 of them now, I think, because I have way too many Alexas in my house. But they're great little Bluetooth speakers. Utah Geek Events is going to put this on and give out speakers for those people that speak. So it's also an incentive to do that. Yes. So we really, really want you out there. And we want it to be that you do this presentation, you do a users group, and then you come up to the Big Data event or SQL Saturday or something else, so you keep doing it. We find that people that learn to speak, they end up liking it and they get addicted to it. Chad's a perfect example. And he's very good at it. But again, it makes the difference in your career as well. I didn't tell this story when I was telling the stories, but my interview story. A lot of people ask me, well, how do you interview? You know, what do you do? I'm like, I haven't interviewed for a job in 10 years. Like, what do you mean? I mean, I haven't interviewed for a job in 10 years. I go to lunch with friends, I talk to them, and they offer me a job, and that's it. I literally have not interviewed in about 10 years. And I've been in 4 different jobs in 10 years. So trust me when I say it's a thing. It's because you're out in the community, you're talking to people, you're speaking, you're presenting, you're seen as the expert. People want you to come work for them then because you're out there speaking. So I strongly suggest everybody speak whenever they can. It's one of my criteria for my junior DBAs. I'm training 2 right now. I've trained 3 or 4 junior DBAs in my time, and I'm training 2 right now. I'm just about to start another one next week, and they will have to present this year. I will literally give them bad performance reviews if they don't present. And that's simple because as a DBA, I tell people all the time, as a DBA, we present every day. Every time a developer comes to us and says, how do I fix this stored procedure? You're doing a presentation. You're teaching them something, but you're doing it to a smaller audience. All you got to do is do it to a bigger audience and you'll be fine. And just learn a few of these things that we talk about here. So yes, I force everyone to present. Aaron Meador was one of my first junior DBAs I taught. He presented during Speaker Idle at SQL Server Users Group like 4 years ago. What's funny about it is I wasn't there. I forced him to do it and everything else, and that was like the one meeting I had missed in like 3 years. So he never lets me live that down.
So where do you work at?
I work at Podium Incorporated. So right now. And actually I'm doing Postgres more than SQL Server. So, but I do keep my side on both. And I'll be presenting at the SQL Server User Group, probably about Postgres, maybe. We'll see.
That the building right there on the north side of I-15 just before the Pine Mountain?
Well, no, that's, you mean on the east side.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's right on the east side, right after 2100 North. We're the building right after 2100 North. And we're about to be a second building.
So we would love to have you guys speak.
Yep.
Particularly if you've never done it before.
Yes.
That's
the goal, right.
This isn't for the people who speak twice a year, go to all the conferences and speak at all the conferences. This isn't for them.
Mm-hmm.
This is for the people who haven't done it before and are like, I don't know. I'd like to give it a shot once. Maybe. See if I like it. Right? Maybe I'll give it a try. This is a great spot to do it. Low stress. We all know each other. It's not going to be tough. It's not going to be hard.
Right.
It's 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And pick something that works, and you come and present. So far, we have one person who's already asked to be on the schedule. So we got one. We could could take more than the 2 or 3. We could take 6. We could take 7. We could do it. Our plan is just do it next month. If we get a lot of people interested, we'll do 2 months.
Yep.
We'll do whatever month.
That's how we did it in the SQL Saturday, the Salt Lake City one. Andrea earlier this year had two ones because she had, I think, 4 and 4 or something like that, about 8 people. Yeah.
So we would love to do that. And this is a great opportunity to get your feet wet. It's not that hard to put together a 15-minute piece.
If you have questions, you can always ask me. I will always respond to, hey, I'm trying to work on this presentation or something. I'll go into gory details on all sorts of things for you. And I'm sure that Chad will help too as well. And he's done a lot of great presentations. I will see if I can make it. It depends on when it is. I have a terribly, terribly busy schedule right now. But if I can make it next month to see them and to give feedback, I will. Because that was always my favorite part. One thing you've got to understand is that when I watch a presentation, I don't watch as much for the content anymore. I'm usually critiquing the presenter. So every users group that someone presents, in my journal, basically it's all the things they did right or wrong. And I will usually give them that feedback and stuff. And so it's those sort of things. So I tend to critique presenters all the time. And I will usually go to a conference now, and I will go to different sessions based on who the presenter is, because I know they're really good. I mean, you can learn from a person.
Who are telling stories.
What?
You have the people who are telling stories.
Yes. You go to the people that are telling stories, absolutely, because they will, again, you will remember it better than anything else. I mean, every time I go to a presentation that's got nothing but facts and stuff, it's hard to retain. And I write down pages and pages in my book, but do you actually remember it? Or do you go back to your book and look it up 100 times and then you remember it? But if you tell a story, it makes all the difference. So.
I think this is a great opportunity. If you want to start speaking or you want to add this to part of your career, this is a great opportunity. I don't have past personality, so I'm not going to give you guys the hard sell on the way out. I can't push that. That's what Pat did to me. He said, you gave me a date and said, you're speaking on this date, that's what it is, right? And I was like, but I can't,
You're speaking on this date.
And,
I don't ask, I tell them. Because if you say to me you're interested in doing one, I'll say, okay, you've got August. Nothing makes you do it better than a deadline. And right now you've got a deadline, July. You've got July. You've got plenty of time. For a 15-minute, plenty of time. Find something every day that you're completely like, oh, I've done this a million times. And don't say to yourself, well, Brent's presented on it, or Chad has, or someone else has. It doesn't matter. It's yours. Present on it. Doesn't matter what it is.
But it's not true that everybody already knows it either.
Right. That's true.
Everybody does this. They've been doing this for years.
No, that's not true.
That's not true.
How long it takes you to prepare them.
Well, but that's my point. That's why the best thing that you can learn from this 15-minute thing is that if you over-prepare, then when you practice, when you start saying it, when you start speaking it, you're going to realize, oh, I've got 30 minutes. I've got to cut this down. I've got to cut this down. There's no better lesson you can learn than over-prepare a presentation and learn how to cut it down. Because we all over-prepare. We all make too much content for our first presentations. And there's nothing better than making sure you're on time.
You guys have to determine these are the most important points.
Yes.
And it makes your presentation a lot better because you don't fill in with a bunch of stuff you really didn't need. You get the salient points.
Most important points.
Really makes your presentation fit.
Yep.
So are you part of the Insider Dev Tour that's happening next weekend?
No. Is that the 2019 one that Andrew's doing?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to make that. There was something else going on for me next weekend.
I was just curious. But you work at Podium, right? My son-in-law works there too.
Cool. Yeah, it's a fun place. Okay, any other questions?
So what's this accumulate? So next month there's a speaker idol.
Correct.
Like speed dating
Yeah.
Not quite so far. So next month we'll have a group of speakers, 10 to 15 minute presentations, back to back with feedback in between. So it's an opportunity to get your about speaking, to talk about a topic, to not have to take a whole hour.
And you're the third speaker, by the way.
Yes. What's your topic?
here.
It'll be here. Yes. So our user group meeting is, what was the date, Jake? Was it the 18th? July 18th. It's the third Thursday in July 18th.
I'm going to be in Logan. I'll be in Logan.
It'll be in Logan.
No. I have Wizarding Days that weekend. Wizarding Days in Logan. So.
So it'll be here, so we'll have speakers. If we get 3 or 4, we'll do them all on that day, and then we'll ask someone to come back and do a full presentation in August if they're willing. I'm not gonna.
Give them a date, Chad. You got to give them a date.
There's the speed dating part.
Whoever wins, just give it to them.
When they do this in Salt Lake Users Group, they usually get 7 to 10 people. They do it over 2 months, really 2 months in a row. But this is a great opportunity to, that's low risk, right? How hard is it to put together a 15-minute presentation? Do you know how many slides that is? How many slides is a 15-minute presentation?
Depends on whether you want the results to come out right.
It's about 6.
I would actually, the ones I've done is usually about 3, because then I just drop straight into demo, and then I go from there, and I don't come back
That's
to it.
because you've gotten yours efficiently.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
That's 6 PowerPoint slides.
Yep.
3 to 6.
36.
That's it.
Yep.
That's really it.
Yep.
And to be honest, if you correctly pick a topic that you're passionate about, you will spend 15 minutes on those 3 slides.
Mhm.
And that's it. If you want to speak, this is an awesome opportunity to say, you know what, that's really low risk. There's going to be, 5 to 10 people here.
Mhm.
It'll be the people you always see, plus one person who wandered in because there was a topic very interesting. There'll be one new guy. Jake's going to come back. So that's what it's going to be. This is really what it's all the people you know, it's your friends, pick a topic, do it, and say, I want to give it a shot. He says this is going to help my career. Not only is it going to change the way I talk to other people and make me help me to do that better. People look at my resume and say, oh yeah, you support the community. You know how to share. You actually teach. Some of the upper level jobs, they look for that. It's not just, can you do the work? Can you teach others here how to do that? When you look at the senior positions, that's in the job description. You help the junior people. How do they know if you can help junior people or not?
Just don't ask.
I did.
Yeah.
I
presented.
I used a group meeting on how to do encryption. I taught a user group meeting on the options in managing Studio. I taught a user group meeting on the different parts of the select statement. Select from, where, group by.
I mean, every DBA should know how to present, because frequently, even if you're not doing it one-on-one with your developers, if you're trying to get your developers to become better by writing better queries and things like that, which is always important, because if you don't, you're always going to be fixing them, you have to present it. Is that what?
Chad taught classes for years.
Oh yeah, so have I.
Developers actually know what they were doing.
Oh yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it's either that or fix all your problems.
Right, right.
Honestly.
Every DBA knows that we cannot one-on-one with 45 people. It's never one-to-one. When you've got one engineer, you don't have one DBA. You have 30 engineers and one DBA. Yeah.
I've said this here in this group before. I'll say it one more time. I look at the community piece as part of a four-legged stool, right? If you have a stool with one leg on it, you can't sit on it. That doesn't work. If all you have on your resume is education, you're coming out of school, and Pat spoke to this. Yeah, I just graduated, I got a great GPA. Cool. Can you actually do anything? And I'm really sorry that that's the first question you're going to get in their head anyway if they don't actually say it. Can you do anything? You went to school, but can you actually write a program? Can you program a short program? But if you have schooling and you have 5 years experience, say, oh, okay, there may be something there. If you have schooling and you have a certification, okay, maybe there's something there. If you have schooling, a certification, and speaking experience in the community or a blog, oh, okay, there's something to it. So there's the 4 legs. There's the education, the experience, the certification, the community. This is that leg.
Yeah, I've never asked one of my people that have come out of college or whatever what their GPA was. Usually it says on their resume, but I honestly don't care.
I actually had a boss that did ask.
Oh,
He
yeah?
said he wouldn't hire anybody that didn't have a 4.0.
Wow. Yeah, not
They
me.
do the work, they don't know how to fix the grading system. They don't want it.
My favorite, one of my favorite speakers is Drew Mingle. Does anybody know Drew Mingle? He's the state data coordinator of Utah. Literally, he runs the state's data projects. Opendata.utah.gov is his website, and he controls all the data for Utah. Yeah, he got a C average, and Logan in cash up there. And he's like, yeah, I barely graduated. He actually went back to speak to him when we were at another conference. He's like, I barely graduated this college, and look what I do now, and I do it just fine.
C's get degrees.
What?
C's get degrees.
C's get degrees. Yep. Okay.
Are there any final questions? We need to let Pat.
You want me to stop this?
Let's see.
Or you have to stop it.
We've got one question apparently here. Hold on.
What?
Oh, thank you, Pat. Your presentation was great, and I appreciate you joining us. Count me in for a 15-minute presentation next month. Yes, we got two.
Yay.
Okay. Thank you, Christian. That was Christian's name. All right, yeah, we're going to go ahead and close out the recording. Pat,
Yeah, I think I
stick around
stopped
for
sharing.
a couple minutes for questions. I do have, I'll go quickly over the past slides, and then we'll be done. I'm going to go ahead and close out the GoToMeeting. Thank you, those who joined us online, and thank you, Pat.